after you work through that and you've got an idea of the purpose of the intervention, you need to decide how much structure are you going to use in your therapy process. So is it going to be primarily child-centered, where that has been the philosophy in the early intervention of basing it on their current routines and activities and things that already occur and just supporting that development? Or is it going to be clinician directed, where you are providing a high level of um, in like intervention from you? You're doing a lot to facilitate that language skill. They may be doing drills with 2-word utterances where you throw a beanbag and throw a beanbag for one word, throw a beanbag for the second word, and you maybe have pictures that you mix up on the floor in front of them. And as they change the different sequences of pictures, those are the words they produce. So it's more of a drill or drill play, or hybrid, which, like a lot of things in speech language pathology, we're not usually all the way one way or the other. We're going to use the strategies that make sense for the individual child. And many times those are more hybrid kinds of strategies. The clinician directed, again, based on theoretical principles of behaviorism, we're going to have stimulus, response, chains that go from you introduce something, they make a response, you either reinforce it or correct it, and over and over and over again. Types of clinician-directed activities are drill, which is what we've described, and we'll look at this video in a bit. Very structured, very clear. Drill play, where you add in, okay, every 5 responses, you're going to get to take a turn rolling the dice in a game or adding a piece to a puzzle. It's going to let you get a high number of repetitions. Discrete trial, which is probably the most structured, and each trial has an instruction, the response, the consequence. The target is to say more juice. The child repeats it. Clinician praises, prompts again. Maybe they get a reward or a token. And on the other side, those child-centered strategies. These are very naturalistic. Intervention occurs within the context of activities the child would want to do anyway. You follow the child's lead. They're natural reinforcers, so they're getting to do what they want. So that's sort of the reinforcer versus getting any kind of a prize or turn at something as an external reinforcer. The techniques, the strategies that you use during child-centered approaches, the therapeutic context of that is those strategies increase the likelihood that the child will imitate, but you don't directly request in a completely child-centered philosophy. You don't say this, say that. You facilitate with your language facilitation strategies. Those in and of themselves should increase the likelihood that the child is going to attempt new targets. And it takes knowing the child really well, because you have to be able to read, interpret, and respond to their cues for this to be very useful. Some children will not at first very willingly include you in their play. And so then you have to get a bit more structured. So while a child-centered approach is nice for generalization, and that's the criticism of clinician-directed, that they don't generalize as well to real-world settings. You have to build that in, but it's possible. We do it all the time. Child-centered strategies will generalize, but maybe not, the strategies themselves might not be as effective in getting the behavior to change. So the child-centered language facilitation strategies listed here, those are your strategies in child-centered. Self-talk, where you talk about what you're doing. I'm putting the cow in the barn, right? And that's what you're doing. Parallel talk, where you talk about what they're doing. You are putting the star on the tree, whatever. Expectant wait, where you wait and look like it's their turn to say something, and kind of hold that and have provided models and see what happens there. Expectant wait can be a great tool. Recast, expansions, and extensions all relate to taking the child's utterance and changing it in some way. So in some sources call all of these just recast, and others differentiate. So I want you to know what the differences are in case you encounter those. Recast is taking an utterance. The child says, I went, and then you recast it into a different type of sentence. Did you go? Something like that. An expansion corrects usually the grammar of an utterance the child has produced, but it doesn't add in any new information. So if he says, I goed, then you would say, I went, right? To kind of help model that and correct that grammatical error. Extensions add in some new information. Child says, I went, and you say, oh, you went to the store or you went to the park. It adds in some more context. So how are these useful? There's a lot of research that shows, again, using these strategies increases the likelihood that the child will attempt and produce more conversational turns, and also the likelihood that they'll imitate the target that you are producing. So those are really useful, and we'll look at some of the research and outcomes of just using these strategies. And you might think, aren't those things that parents do anyway? How is this therapy? When it's used in a therapeutic context, you're adding in a higher density of models, number one, but you're also knowing when to transition or provide more or less support. So, and not all parents do kind of engage with their children in this way, and that might be some coaching that you can help provide. Some of these, how to use self-talk and parallel talk in particular for parents, families. One of the studies that looked at the efficacy of conversational recasts in grammar development, this was a systematic review of 14 studies. It found an effect size of D equals 0.96. So a 1.0 would be perfect, like the strongest effect size that you could find. 0.96 is extremely strong. There was a lot of change with the use of these recasts during therapy sessions to support grammar development. And then this one, parent implemented language intervention. This was where they helped parents learn to use self-talk and parallel talk. And they found that this increased the toddler expressive vocabulary and mean length of utterance. Okay, so we've gone clinician-directed, child-centered, clinician-directed, had drill play, those kinds of things. Child-centered has the language facilitation strategies, self-talk, parallel talk, expansions, etc. Hybrid in the middle is not quite child-centered because you are going to engineer the environment for the goals, the targets that you have selected to emerge. So the child doesn't have complete control, but they do still have a lot of say in what happens in the intervention. So what does that look like? It looks like an environment in which there are things that are tempting for the child in the environment, things they want to have to play with or eat or whatever the case, that they're in sight, they can see them, but they're not able to reach them. They're going to need help to be able to get the items that they want. So you kind of tempt the child. And it also looks like whatever target you've selected, that you are providing a high number of models. So if it's 2-word phrases, if it's using the word what, if it's asking questions, like the environment is engineered to allow the most possible models and opportunities for the child to produce that form, that target. So if the goal is to increase their use of the word what, then all of the activities and the models that you produce would be provided to elicit that target. There is more of a say this, say that kind of a manned model approach. That's not the primary approach in this hybrid intervention, but they are used like more directive kinds of facilitation strategies. So these types of hybrid treatment approaches, milieu, enhanced milieu, and pre-linguistic milieu are all essentially the same thing based on this tempting and environmental arrangement. Focused stimulation is a version in which you're only providing the high number of targets. You're still selecting the targets and setting the environment up, but you're not requiring the child to produce any targets, but you're still controlling what's happening in the session. Vertical structuring and script therapy, couple of other different variations on hybrid approach, and we'll talk some about those here in a bit. So these milieu strategies are used really commonly in speech language therapy. They're all based on environmental arrangement, responsive interaction, and conversational based context. So it's within the functional activity, something that's not just totally drill based out of context. And the natural consequence is that if they produce the target you need, then they get that thing that they want, and it's more of a natural reinforcer. So in a session in which you're using traditional milieu approach, you're going to start by following their attentional lead. What is it that they like that's in the room? Again, you've set it up, so there are going to be a lot of things they probably like in that space. And then you use where they direct their attention to begin to elicit the targets that you've selected for the session. Use incidental teaching versus a highly clinician-directed approach. The stimuli in the natural environment, you manipulate those, you create opportunities for the child to initiate interaction. And one of the best ones, placing toys in sight but out of reach, or putting toys in containers that they need help to open. So you have all these fun things, but they're going to have to engage with you in some manner to get the thing that they want. The modeling, man modeling, incidental teaching, natural consequences, and time delay are standard kinds of strategies to help push this along. Modeling you're familiar with. Man modeling means you're telling them, say, whatever. Incidental teaching, natural consequences, environmental manipulation, and time delay is that expectant wait again. So if you arrange it, the child comes in, things they want, they can't reach them. Child makes a request and you respond with very focused attention on the request. You wait to see if they're going to add more information in, and you can give kind of partial imitation. You can say something like, if you want that, you need to tell me what you want. Act like you don't know what it is they want. You likely do know, but you're going to wait to see what else will the child do to request the item. If you don't wait for initiation, then you're likely going ahead and saying, well, what do you want? And then using things like good talking. You told me, now I know what you want. Lots of positive reinforcement, but still the main reinforcer is the thing that they wanted, that they now get. So I think we covered this, why it's hybrid and not just child-centered, because you are controlling what's happening in the session, but they have a lot of control as long as what is happening in the session is meeting your goal for the activities, like what you want to focus on the session, then whatever they choose to direct their attention to is like fine, because you've made the environment so that anything they direct it to is going to help progress toward that goal. Here was a study that they looked at 6 months of this pre-linguistic milieu teaching for children with developmental delays, effects on parenting stress in a randomized controlled trial. And they did find that teaching parents how to do this, it was medium-sized effect on the child's rate of intentional communication. So some of these outcomes, some of the things that happen can be difficult to measure. Was it exactly due to the treatment, or did something else happen along with the treatment that we just didn't know about, like normal development happened? And so that was really what was responsible for the effect. But in this one, it was actually a clinical trial, which means it had the highest level of control over external factors and variables like that. With the pre-linguistic milieu, it follows that same approach, but instead of expecting words, you're going to use gestures. You're still going to model words, but you're more focused on them initiating communication through whatever mode they're able. And these might be older children that are still in the pre-linguistic stage of development, or younger children just not advancing as they need to. But it's really to help lay a foundation for communication using nonverbal means, so that as they develop, it's there for spoken word production. Another great option with the milieu approach is this idea of gentle sabotage. And a lot of different ways to do this, but essentially you're kind of messing up what they're doing, what they're wanting to do. They want to get a toy out. Your hands just happen to be on top of the box so they can't get opened until they look at you and they're, oh, that's what you wanted. Okay, yeah, I know because you looked at me. Now I know. But creating barriers to them so that it creates a purpose for them to communicate, going through some of these different options, strategically withholding things. So if you're having pudding or whatever and everybody needs a spoon, you don't give them a spoon and see, will they do anything to initiate what they need? If it's a child that really doesn't appreciate when their favorite page is skipped in the book, now you don't want to totally stress them out. So, you have to think through this too. But skipping a page, like violating expectations, like the standard normal routine, and doing something that creates a little disruption or creates something unexpected within an expected routine, are going to just create opportunities for the child to either protest, no, or you skipped or whatever, comment or ask for help. So it's not something you want to do to a child who's easily stressed out, but it is a useful tool when used correctly. Here's an example. He really needs her to move her hands. She would love for him to look at her. So she's trying to elicit, like, notice me. The hands are attached to arms, and here's my face up here, and use that to like tell me you want me to move my hands away. And that's also expectant wait. And then script therapy, where you have a routine that maybe you're working on inviting a friend to play with maybe a preschool age child. So inviting a friend to play cars, right? You teach the script ahead of time to the child you're working with and practice it with them, role play it. And the child has to be able to sort of understand what it is that you're doing. So maybe for older children, like, you need to ask me if what color car do I want to be, right? And you can write it out too with a lot of visual structure, the script, so that it's not just you telling them what to say, but they have some visual cues as well. Like, first, go invite so and so to play. Here's how you do that. You say, do you want to play cars? And they do that. Then have the friend comes back. And now, which color car do you want to be? And let's get to the starting line. So it has to be kind of able to have distinct steps to the script. 1, 2, 3, go. And again, this child that is working from the script therapy has had lots of opportunities to practice it ahead of time with you. Books can be really good for script therapy too, especially if they have repeated phrases or if it's a really familiar book. And so, choosing your targets and how you're going to go about treatment, what strategies you want to use, and those come from some kind of a theoretical basis. To the maximum extent possible, teach strategies for promoting communication rather than isolated behaviors. What's the purpose of language? To establish social closeness, help them achieve that purpose. Provide intervention dynamic that has ongoing assessment of the child's progress rather than such static, just Q&A kinds of activities. Make sure it's individualized based on the nature of their needs, their language, their cultural background, and their individual learning style. And then tailor it to promote their development from a basis of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So between their unassisted performance and their assisted performance, that's that zone of proximal development, which essentially means you're just providing therapy one step above where they are, and you're going to get there to the end result, but you're not starting with the hardest thing possible for them to do. You're starting one level above where they currently are, maybe two, if you think that they're going to progress pretty quickly. So the good news of all of these different hybrid, clinician-directed, child-centered strategies, the good news is they all work. So this was a systematic review that looked at lots of different approaches. And regardless of if it was direct or indirect or hybrid, 93% of the studies they reviewed found improved expressive language skills in these young children identified as late talkers. So it's not so much does intervention work, it's more like how well does it work and could it possibly work even better? If they made progress, but how much progress? Was it just a little? Was it a lot? Was it like significant progress? So even though we know like most of what we do works, we're still looking for better and better ways to understand how it works and is it working the best of all the possible strategies I could be using?